science,
engineering,
medicine,
chemistry,
physics,
biology, humanities, cardiology,
entrepreneurship, public health, global
aeronautics, science communication.
Hello everyone, I'm Gareth Mitchell. Coming up, coverage of this year's fun-packed, science-packed, technology-packed, performance and food and demonstrations and family and friends-packed Imperial Festival. Lots to report back on. The festival was on a grand scale, but also a tiny scale.
We've got a bit of a journey working through the microbial world. So we're trying to show you the plethora of things that microbes do. From the fact that they're super tiny and you have to have a microscope to be able to see them, to the fact that there are good ones that promote health, but there are also bad ones that don't.
And to another recent event, a certain little thing called the Eurovision Song Contest. Imperial researchers have been finding out what 10 points versus 0 points might mean for a nation's feeling of satisfaction.
The Imperial College Podcast.
Before all that, let's bring you a bit of news from around the college. Hayley Dunning is going to kick us off with some really important Imperial research just recently out, looking into the common cold. What do we need to know?
Yeah, so we've been obviously trying to cure the common cold for quite a long time, but Imperial researchers have recently made quite an interesting breakthrough. Now, one thing to note is that, importantly, this is just lab tests, so it's just cells in a dish, but the molecule they've developed works very differently than any other kind of cold cure so far, and it shows a lot of promise and has been causing some good excitement. Most things that we buy over the counter only really treat the symptoms of the cold, because treating the cause, the virus, is very difficult. It's because really it's a whole group of viruses. It's hundreds of viruses, generally called rhinoviruses, and they're all slightly different, so creating something to tackle them or to vaccinate against them is very, very tricky. So they've done something very interesting instead.
So what have they done?
So all of these viruses, in order to copy themselves and make these little protective capsids, which are like little shells around themselves, they actually hijack a human protein to do that. And all the rhinoviruses hijack the same human protein. So what they've done is actually created a molecule that interrupts that process. So it blocks the viruses from using that protein. Now, attacking the human part of the whole system has been a concept that's been thought about before, but obviously it can have some side effects on humans. But in lab tests already, this shows no obvious side effects and complete blockage of a few of the strains of the virus.
You say that's in lab tests. Is the next step to take it to clinical trial now then?
So the next step will be animal tests just for toxicity and things like that, and then human trials. And they're hoping, perhaps within 5 years this cure could be rolled out more. Another important thing to note about cold is obviously the common cold. We all get colds several times a year, but for some people the colds are more dangerous than others. So for us it's kind of an inconvenience, lie on the sofa for a couple of days. But for people with asthma or chronic diseases like COPD, it can be much more dangerous. So their first aim is to really try and make something that those people can take and take quickly so that they can alleviate the symptoms before they start.
Great. Hayley, thank you very much for that. Well, Caroline Brogan is in the studio with us. Now, Caroline, a bit of a subject change here. You're going to tell us what Mars and Dorset have in common.
I am. So, scientists believe that Mars once harboured water billions of years ago, which naturally brings up the question of possible life on Mars during its watery era. In Dorset, here on Earth, there are acidic streams that likely mimic the older conditions on Mars in terms of its wateriness, its acidity, and the types of rock that can be found. Earth scientists at Imperial have now studied these streams in St Oswald's Bay in Dorset and found traces of organic matter in the rocks. Assuming the conditions do indeed mimic Mars, the fossilised microbes might be what we can expect to find on the red planet when we next go up there in 2020.
How much do they expect to find on Mars?
Well, they calculated that they expect to find 12,000 swimming pools worth of organic matter on Mars.
But we're not talking about little green men here, though, are we?
No, so it would be mostly bacteria who are evolved to survive in extreme environments, like with extreme temperatures and high acidity.
Great, Caroline, thank you very much indeed for that. And that's certainly food for thought the next time I go to Dorset, or indeed Mars. OK, now then, the last weekend of April saw the big event, now an institution in itself. That is our annual Imperial Festival. Managed to get there? Well, thanks for being with us. What follows is a lovely reminder of what you enjoyed. Oh, so you had to miss it. What a shame. We missed you too. But never mind. The next best thing is to soak up the atmosphere via this report from our very own Ryan O'Hare.
So here we are at the Imperial Festival 2018. And the weather may be a little bit wet, but it's not enough to dampen the spirit of visitors. There's so much going on, so let's go take a look. Here we are at the Ingenuity tent. There's lots and lots of exhibits, examples of surgical techniques, scribbling robots, and even quantum bingo.
So I'm George Kuparis, and we're doing a second-year project from bioengineering. It's a VI buggy. It's a smart buggy for VI people. So the idea is that if you're VI, you can't take your baby around using your cane and the buggy at the same time. So we have sensors embedded in our buggy, and they help you navigate. This is a really useful technology, and people need to improve on it. It's probably not in the scope of a second-year project to make it perfect and come to market, but this should definitely be a thing that is available to people who need it.
So we are here in the middle of the Green Future Zone in a tent, which is a bit of an oasis from the madness outside. But we're in an exhibition which is talking about something very serious, and that is plastics and plastic in the environment and in the ocean.
I'm Vinita Khanna, and I work in the physics department here at Imperial. But outside this job, I'm also an artist. So I decided to use plastic because it's the most abundant material that's around.
So Vinita, why are plastics such a problem then?
Well, the problem with plastics are they have been a fantastic material, but unfortunately terrible for the environment. My installation is about the oceans because that's where a lot of it lands up. The study that's been going on at Imperial, which is called the Plastics Adrift, we're looking at the ocean currents and where the plastic lands up, and also at solutions. My idea was to get an emotive response from the public because I feel like we get information, but we don't actually think about or feel what the ocean is about, and we either look at it as somewhere really beautiful for us to relax with or to be fascinated by, or we see it as a trash can and we ignore that part.
Hi guys, what's your names and where are you from?
Len Worrell and Anajan.
Sri Bhavananthan. And we're both from William Perkin, Church of England High School in Ealing, West London.
And what's your exhibition about today? We've got like a table, and we've got some facts and figures on the wall, a poster presentation behind us. So what are you showing people today then?
So our project name is Does the A40 Reduce Lung Function in Students? So, well, our school's next to the A40, which means that there's going to be a lot of pollution.
It's a very, very busy road, isn't it?
Yeah. So the students in our school breathe that air in, and then, well, we use a spirometry test to see how it impacts our lungs.
So we've also measured particulate matter in the air and gas sensors, and we've got a table to show our results. We've also done some lung dissections, and we've also got a lung on display for everyone to see.
So what have you got under this? Oh, what is that? What have we got in front of us here then?
You've got a pair of sheep lungs.
And what are the sheep lungs here to show us then?
Basically the function of the lungs and how they operate.
And what do you want people to take away from your exhibition today then?
Well, later we'll be pumping up the lungs, and it will show them how the lungs inflate and deflate. It will teach people more about how the lungs work and how blood gets around your body and how it gets oxygenated at your lungs.
Excellent, thank you very much guys.
I'm Luke Alsop from the CMBI, where we study bacteria and find out about infection.
So Luke, we've got loads and loads of people, as children and parents everywhere, walking around looking at bugs. So can you tell us, why is it set up this way? How is it different this year?
So this year we've got a bit of a journey working through the microbial world. So we're trying to show you the plethora of things that microbes do, from the fact that they're super tiny and you have to have a microscope to be able to see them, to the fact that there are good ones that promote health, but there are also bad ones that don't.
And what's the most popular part of the exhibition so far?
That's a super difficult question. The microscopes are always a big success. We've got some Lego models explaining how bacteria are capable of moving, and we've got a bubble gun demonstration of one strategy of antimicrobial resistance, which is super popular.
So you're trying to catch the next generation scientists young then?
That's right, catch them young, but also just enlighten people a little bit.
So Luke, what do you want visitors to take away from the exhibition today then?
We want them to take away the fact that microbes are super tiny, but also the fact that they are everywhere. They're important for our health, but they are also capable of causing disease, but they just want to survive and replicate as well.
That report from this year's Imperial Festival from Ryan O'Hare. Now, Ryan can cover a fair bit of ground over a weekend, but not even he can be quite everywhere. So we were keen to capture voices from elsewhere at the festival too.
We've made elements and dressed up as scientists. We're making bacteria. I made this one, and then I made these two. I've made this green one, and now I'm doing a mini version of that.
Hi, I'm Neil Dufton and I'm in the hands-on zone, and we've got iCell Casino on the go. What we're doing is we're trying to see if we can use familiar symbols and signs that we see in unfamiliar places. Like when we go to a hospital, we're looking around for particular signs to orientate ourselves, and if we can apply that to biological systems. So we have particular symbols for the body, and then, because we know these are specialised locations in ourselves, these are made up of specialised cells. So we're using the same principle to see if people can understand how cells work using signs and symbols that we would associate with everyday life. Yesterday was absolutely ludicrous. The amount of people that came through was phenomenal. Unbelievable response. Science doesn't have to be all about the complicated terminology, and it's much more about thinking about how we respond to our environment and associating that with how our bodies respond to their particular environment.
My name is Hassan. I'm a fourth-year aeronautics student. Basically, I'm helping out with my research group for my master's thesis, which is space propulsion, plasma propulsion. And we're just demonstrating for the kids how you can use electric forces to move objects. We've got those levitating wands that create an electric field, and a bit of tin foil over that levitates. Yeah, most people seem to think it's something out of Harry Potter or Star Wars, where you got this magic levitating wand. Once we explain it's electricity, they're all really surprised. This is just to prove that you can use electricity, which is what we think is the way forward in the future, rather than using chemical propulsion systems. So don't be surprised that in a couple of years, maybe 10, 20 years, electric propulsion will be the main source for rockets flying in space.
So I'm Stefan Leutenecker, I'm in the Department of Computing, and we are working with self-flying drones. We are showing a drone that actually flies itself, so it has camera mounted on it and also computer, and it can use that to figure out where it is, and then we can tell it where to go, and we can tell it to fly quite complicated missions. I think they find it very interesting that the drone can actually fly itself without you having to steer it. We can use a lot of this technology to solve real problems. I think sometimes there is controversies about robots, about drones, but I guess what we want to emphasize here is that there is real applications where they can be really useful. Things like inspection of a hazardous site where we don't want to have people go there. We can send a drone around, take a picture, come back, and that could be very useful. It's been quite busy. I think it's picking up now. Yesterday was very busy too, but it's been fun. I hope we can keep that interest, and at some point we might see them enroll here at Imperial College.
I'm Chloe Slevin, and we're at the Reflection Zone at the Imperial Festival. The Reflection Zone is all about project and work done by the Science Communication Unit here. So it's mainly the Science Communication Master's students and the Science Media Production Master's students. We have a fairground of science where you can interact with carnival things and hook a duck and learn about positive and negatives about science. We have student-made documentaries, radio packages, the chance to test out some radio equipment, and then we have some really exciting printed materials written by the course, so magazines, short stories, and we also have an area where you can tell us your thoughts. So the Reflection Zone is about hearing the visitors' ideas on things like climate change and anything relating to science and society. So you can write on our paper-covered walls and tell us everything you want to tell us. People are having a great time, people are really engaged, the walls are almost covered already, and it's only lunchtime. So I think that's a good indicator.
Voices there from the Imperial Festival, and they were captured for us by Bridie Kennelly. What a weekend that was. Well, finally, doing well in the Eurovision Song Contest could be associated with a nation's people feeling more satisfied with life. Imperial researchers have concluded that after analysing data from the Eurobarometer survey of well over 100,000 people in 33 European countries. Now, the team looked at satisfaction scores around the time of the Eurovision Song Contest. Ryan O'Hare has been finding out more from one of the study authors, Anthony Laverty of the School of Public Health.
So what we found was that, if you put together 6 or 7 years worth of data, 2009 to 2015, then you find in the years where your country does 10 places better, then there's a 4% bump in people reporting that they're satisfied with their lives. You don't really see much difference. So if you win the contest, that doesn't confer an additional benefit. So that's the first part, just about your country's in the final, how happy are people with their lives. And then there's a second question around, if you make it to the final but you don't do very well, is that better than not making it to the final at all? And so Britain is in the enviable, I suppose, position where it always makes it to the final. That's because we pay a lot of money essentially to the European Broadcasting Union to be in the final. But some countries, they have to go through a sort of semi-final process or they just don't take part at all. But if you make it to the final and you still come in the bottom 5 places, you've performed terribly, as we term it in the paper, you see this kind of 13% bump in life satisfaction compared to those countries who didn't make it to the final at all. So it's kind of suggesting that even if you don't do very well, it's kind of better to be in the final.
So it sounds like it's a case of it's more about the taking part than the actual winning then.
Yeah, so someone said it's this sort of classic case that your parents maybe said to you or so on, it's better to take part than not take part at all. So, and that is more or less, I would say, what the findings suggest. It's better to be in the final than it is to be one of these people who doesn't take part because they sort of don't apply, or who doesn't take part because they get kicked out in the semi-final.
And is there any indication about what's likely to be causing this increase in life satisfaction then?
It's tricky, I think, to sort of speculate on what are the mechanisms behind this. So, there's other research. If you look at things such as if your city wins the Super Bowl in America, or if your country wins the World Cup, you see these sort of increases in life satisfaction, increases in productivity. I'd say the mechanisms are reasonably unclear. Is it just that people feel good in general, a sort of general diffuse feeling there? Is it that they enjoy watching the Eurovision Song Contest, or is it something else? So I'd say we don't really know that, and so we're pointing, I suppose, more to a association than a real, strong pathway where we can say, this is the mechanism via which these things happen.
So how did you come up with the study then?
This really came out of a conversation we were having in the kitchen at work around, do you think that these things are related? Someone said, if your country does well in the Eurovision, do you think people are more happier with their lives in general? And so my co-author, Philippa, said, we have data on that. We have these big European surveys on how satisfied people are with their lives. We've been using those surveys for some other more serious work about smoking and various things. And obviously, once you have a question and the data's there, you think, well, this is sort of what we're trained to do. We might as well have a look at it.
So some of our listeners may be thinking that the link between Eurovision is a bit of fun, but there's a serious side to this type of research. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
There is a serious side to this research, which is, really around, commonly we think of health and we think of people's behaviours, the individual things which are happening to you, the choices and so on that you make. But, there's something about thinking what are the high-level structural factors, I suppose, which are shaping how people feel about their lives. They're shaping people's happiness and then, all of those related health things. So, really, I would say that, one takeaway message is it's not just people's individual behaviour which is shaping health. There are these big factors at a national, international level that can be affecting things, and that, includes sort of frivolous things such as the Eurovision Song Contest, but also, less frivolous things are, in there, geopolitics, Brexit, these type of things are also having an impact, a potential impact anyway, on health.
And of course, while we're discussing this, we have to ask, do you have a favourite Eurovision song yourself?
Well, my favourite Eurovision song is probably Gina G, Ooh Ah, Just a Little Bit. And that is handy because we managed to get the title of that song into the abstract by saying performance is associated with ooh ah, just a little bit of improved life satisfaction. So personally, I'd say that's a win in terms of my own favourite song, and also a win in terms of probably the most fun sentence I've been paid to write while at Imperial.
That's Anthony Laverty talking there to Ryan O'Hare. And that's it for this edition of the podcast. Thanks very much for being with us. Just before I go, the usual reminders. If you're into that Twitter kind of thing, then you can follow us. We are at Imperial Spark, and I'm at Gareth M, otherwise known as Gareth Mitchell. And also you can keep up with everything that's going on around the college, in between the podcasts, of course, via our news website. That's imperial.ac.uk/news. Well, I'll see you next time. Thank you very much for listening, and it's goodbye for now.